Cronus reached for the bundle Rhea had brought him. He'd done this before, and each time it ended the same way. The child vanished before it could grow up and one day claim its father's throne. Rhea stood before him silently, making no attempt to take the bundle back, and Cronus didn't even bother checking what was inside. He swallowed it whole, certain he had just rid himself of the last threat. Only there was no child inside the fabric. There was a stone lying there. And far from the palace, on the island of Crete, the real newborn Zeus cried out in the depths of a hidden cave. His cries threatened to ruin the entire plan, so the armed guards immediately raised their shields and began slamming their weapons against them, drowning out the infant's voice with a metallic clash. Cronus was sure that his sixth child was dead. In reality, he had just spared the one who would one day return for his throne. Cronus's fear had begun long before that night. He had come to power by overthrowing the previous generation, and he knew full well that a throne seized by force could one day be taken away in the same way. When he was told that one of his own children would become stronger than him and take his power, Cronus decided not to wait. Rhea gave birth to his first child herself. Cronus looked at the baby and held out his hands. "Give it to me." Rhea hugged the child close to her. "This is your son." "That's exactly why I can't leave him." She didn't immediately understand what he was going to do, and when she did, it was too late. Thus Hestia disappeared. Then Demeter was born, then Hera, then Hades and Poseidon. Each time, Rhea hoped that Cronus would stop, and each time, fear proved stronger than fatherhood. He swallowed his own children because he saw each one not as a son or daughter, but as a future enemy. When Rhea realized she was expecting another child, she no longer asked her husband for mercy. She decided to deceive him. Shortly before her birth, she left the domain of Cronus and reached Crete. There, far from the Titan's eyes, Zeus was born in a hidden cave. Rhea held the baby in her arms and knew she couldn't stay with him. If Cronus notices her absence, he will start searching. If he hears a child cry, everything will end. She looked at her son. "I can't take you with me." The sound of metal hitting metal echoed nearby. The guards were checking the shields they were supposed to use to muffle the baby's cries. Rhea carefully handed Zeus over to those to whom she entrusted his life. "Don't let him know the child exists." She left the cave alone. Returning to Cronus without the baby would have been a betrayal, so Rhea found a large stone, wrapped it in cloth, and held it to her chest as if she were carrying a newborn. When she entered her husband's room, Cronus didn't even ask the child's name. "Give it here." Rhea didn't move. Cronus frowned. "Rhea." She slowly handed him the package. "Here is your son." This turned out to be enough. Cronus swallowed the stone. Rhea looked at him, and for the first time in years, knew something he didn't. One child was saved. One. And while Cronus continued to rule, convinced that the prophecy was no longer a threat, a boy grew up in Crete who should not have existed in his world. If you enjoy watching great myths as quick, cinematic Minecraft movies, subscribe. This family story will soon evolve into a war for the entire world of gods. The years passed quickly. Zeus was no longer a helpless infant whose cries had to be hidden by slamming his shields. He had grown up far from Cronus, and with his strength came growing questions that those around him had been unwilling to answer for too long. Why should he hide? Why did his father never look for him as a son? And most importantly, where are the rest of Rhea's children? When Zeus finally heard the truth, he was silent for a long time. His brothers and sisters did not die in the war or disappear into a distant land. Their own father swallowed them. All? The answer was short. Everyone who was born before you. Zeus looked towards the sea. Somewhere far beyond him was Cronus, sitting calmly on his throne, certain that his last dangerous son had long since vanished. Zeus could have stayed in Crete. He has already received what the others did not receive: life. No one forced him to return to the creature that tried to destroy him on his birthday. But now to hide meant accepting Cronus' decision as final. Zeus clenched his hands. If they are still there, I will return them. He was reminded who he was going to deal with. Cronus wasn't a lonely old man who could simply be pushed off his throne. The power of the Titans stood behind him, and for decades he lived with one thought: not to allow his own child to become stronger than him. If he finds out who you are, he will try to finish what he started. Zeus turned around. Then it's better that he finds out too late. For the first time since his birth, he left Crete not as a fugitive. Somewhere ahead was his father, who thought he was dead. And inside this father, there was still a family that Zeus had never seen. To free her, he had to get close enough to Cronus to deceive the one who had spent his entire life fearing his return. To go to his father openly and declare himself the saved son would have meant destroying the only advantage he had left. Cronus was still convinced that Zeus had died on the day of his birth. Metis agreed to help him. After hearing the story to the end, she immediately rejected the idea of a direct attack, because even if Zeus managed to get close to Cronus, defeating him would be useless as long as the brothers and sisters remained prisoners within their own father. "Then we must first make him return them," said Zeus. "He won't do it voluntarily." "Then we won't ask voluntarily." Metis had prepared a means to force Cronus to vomit up what he had once swallowed. The danger now lay not in the plan itself, but in its surreptitious implementation. Zeus approached his father's domain as a man no one there should recognize. Before him stood a ruler who had lived for years without fear of his own children, because he considered each of them forever removed. It was precisely this calm that allowed him to approach so close. When Cronus took the remedy Metis had prepared, nothing changed at first. He continued speaking and moving as if he had everything under control. But after a few moments, he stopped, grabbed his stomach abruptly, and tried to rise. "What did you give me?" He received no answer. Cronus bent down, and the first thing that came out was a large stone. For a few seconds there was silence around. Cronus looked at him as if the past had suddenly returned and laid itself right at his feet. He recognized the bundle Rhea had once brought, remembered the child he hadn't even bothered to see, and realized the deception before he could even utter a word. "No." But his body no longer obeyed him. Following the stone, the children it had swallowed many years ago began to return. One after another, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon appeared before it, and each new god transformed the ancient prophecy from a distant threat into an ongoing reality. Cronus retreated. The 5 children he had thought destroyed stood before him again. And then Zeus came out from behind them. Cronus' gaze settled on him, and now no further explanation was required. "You." "I." Cronus turned his gaze to the stone. "I swallowed you." "You swallowed what Rhea gave you." Cronus' face changed. Everything he had done to maintain his throne turned out to be based on a single mistake made many years ago. "So you came for my power." Zeus looked at his brothers and sisters, whom he had just seen for the first time. "I came for my family." "Don't pretend. I know why the son returns to the father he is destined to overthrow." "Then you yourself know better than anyone why this war began long before my return." Cronus no longer responded. Instead, he called upon those on whose strength his power rested. Until that moment, the conflict had remained a family secret, hidden behind palace walls and the fear of one ruler. Now, everything had changed. The Titans stood behind Cronus, and none of them were willing to voluntarily hand over the world to a generation of young gods newly freed. Poseidon looked at Zeus. I hope you had a plan for this part, too. Zeus followed the approaching opponents with his gaze. The plan was to get you out. Hades chuckled slightly. Then the first part worked. So we'll have to deal with the second one together. The ensuing war quickly demonstrated that liberation alone was not enough. The young gods wielded immense power, but the Titans had held their power for decades and knew how to defend it. Zeus attempted to break through their line in the center. Poseidon attacked from the other side. Hades sought out weak points, but every Olympian success was met with an almost immediate counterattack. Weeks passed, then months, and the battlefield only expanded. Rocks split, the earth became scarred with blows, positions changed hands, but neither side gained an advantage capable of ending the struggle. Sometimes it seemed as if another attack would finally force the Titans to retreat, but Cronus would throw new forces into the fray, and everything would return to almost the same point. After one particularly difficult clash, the Olympians retreated from the battlefield. Poseidon threw the damaged weapon to the ground. If we go there again tomorrow the same way, tomorrow will end exactly the same. Zeus looked at the smoke rising from the ruined slopes. I know. Hera came closer. Then we need to change something. Hades was silent longer than the others, and then said, There are those whom Cronus does not use. Poseidon turned to him. Who? Those who are kept in Tartarus. The name alone was enough to change the conversation. Deep beneath the world were the Cyclopes and the 100-handed ones, creatures that the previous rulers considered so dangerous that they chose to imprison them in a place from which escape was almost impossible. Poseidon immediately understood where the conversation was heading. Are you suggesting we open a way out for them? I propose to find out why Cronus is so afraid of them being released, Zeus replied. What if after liberation they attack us? Zeus looked at him. Then we'll have a new problem. But if we don't do anything, the old problem will already have won. For some time, no one answered. At the top, a war awaited them that they could not yet win. Below were creatures none of them had reason to trust. Zeus rose first. Cronus is certain they'll remain chained forever, which means he's completely unprepared for what will happen if we remove those chains. Hades followed after. Poseidon looked at both of them and sighed heavily. Will we ever have a plan that doesn't start with something crazy? Zeus was already heading towards the descent. If it appears, we will definitely try. They left the battlefield behind and began to move deeper, where the light and noise of battle gradually faded. The stone walls grew darker, the air grew heavier, and the path ahead seemed to collapse beneath the world itself. Soon, even the thunder of the distant war could no longer be heard. All that remained were the steps of the three brothers and the darkness of Tartarus, behind which lay the only advantage, the existence of which Cronus preferred not to remember. The deeper the brothers descended, the less this place resembled a typical cave. The passages grew wider, the rocks dropped away, and a dim, fiery light gradually appeared ahead, followed by a heavy, metallic rumble. Zeus stopped near the huge gates. Something so massive was moving behind them that every blow of the chains echoed in the stone walls. Poseidon looked at his brother. Last chance to change your mind. Zeus placed his hand on the lock. That's exactly why we came here. When the gates opened, they found themselves confronted by the Cyclopes and the 100-handed ones, creatures the previous government had chosen not to persuade or use, but simply to remove from the world. They eyed the newcomers warily, and Zeus understood that simply opening the door would not be enough to turn the captives into allies. One of the Cyclopes came as close as the chains allowed. Who are you? Sons of Cronus. After these words, a dull noise arose among the captives. Then why did you come? Zeus looked at the chains. To take them off. Poseidon glanced at him quickly, but said nothing. Cyclops didn't believe it at first. Cronus is keeping us here. Why should his son free us? Because I am fighting against him. And you need our strength. I do, Zeus replied calmly. But if I only needed soldiers, I could leave you in chains and try to command from here. I offer you something else. Freedom. And then you will decide for yourself whether you will fight. For a few moments, no one moved. Then Hades walked up to the nearest chain. Let's start with this one. The castles fell to the stone one after another. When the last of the Cyclopes was free, he didn't rush to the exit. Instead, he looked at Zeus and said, "If you're really going to overthrow Cronus, your bare hands won't be enough." A fire broke out in the depths of Tartarus. The Cyclopes set to work. Zeus watched as weapons, previously unknown to either him or his opponent, appeared amidst the sparks. For Poseidon, they crafted a trident. Hades received a helmet capable of concealing himself from view. The Cyclops was the last to lift up what had been prepared for Zeus. Lightning. It flared in his hand so brightly that for a moment it illuminated the entire stone hall. Poseidon narrowed his eyes. Now I understand why Cronus preferred to keep them underground. Zeus looked at the new weapon. Then it's time to show him what happened while he was busy with the war. They returned to the top as a different group from the one that had descended into Tartarus. Cronus expected another attack from the young gods and prepared to repel it just as he had done the previous ones. But the first sign of change was not Zeus. The freed hundred-handed ones appeared from behind the rocks. The Titans were still trying to regroup when huge rocks came hurtling toward them. One blow followed another, the ground shook, and their familiar formation crumbled faster than Cronus could issue new orders. Poseidon stepped forward and raised his trident for the first time. Now I like our plan. He slammed his weapon into the ground, and another part of the Titan's defense crumbled. Hades disappeared from the enemy's sight. Zeus remained opposite Cronus. The father looked at his new allies, at the weapons in the hands of the freed children, and finally understood where the advantage he had kept them from receiving for so long had come from. You let them out. You left them there, Zeus replied. I simply opened the doors. Cronus raised his weapon. Do you think one lightning bolt will make you a king? Zeus looked at the flashing light in his hand. No, but she will help end this conversation. He hit. Lightning tore through the sky, and for the first time in the war, the Titans couldn't simply withstand the blow and continue the fight. The hundred-handed Titans rained down rocks on them. Poseidon broke through one of the remaining lines. Hades appeared where he was least expected, and each new blow from Zeus forced the enemy to retreat further. The war, which had been stagnant for months, suddenly changed in one day. Cronus tried to rally the Titans for a final stand, but the space around him was rapidly emptying. Those who had recently seemed the unshakable force of the old world were now retreating to the very brink of defeat. Zeus approached. All this could have been stopped many years ago. Cronus gripped his weapon. If I had left you alive, you would still have come from my power. You never gave us a chance to find out. Cronus attacked first. The last clash was brief compared to the entire war that had brought them to this moment. Cronus still wielded immense power, but now he faced no child hidden in Crete, nor even a young god just beginning to seek allies. Zeus had returned with his family, the weapons of the Cyclopes, and those his father had once deemed safer in chains. Another lightning strike forced Cronus to his knees. Around him, the Titans laid down their arms one by one. The war is over. The vanquished were led away to where Zeus's new allies had recently emerged. The gates of Tartarus closed again. Only now, behind them were those who had previously considered this place a safe prison for others. The hundred-handed remained to guard the prisoners. For the first time in a long time, it became quiet upstairs. But the victory left one question that could not be resolved by another battle. Cronus no longer ruled. Who should take his place? Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades met no longer as fugitives or soldiers in the midst of war. Before them lay a world that needed to be divided so that the next power struggle wouldn't immediately follow the last. The lot determined the brothers' possessions. Poseidon got the sea. Hades is the underworld. Zeus, the sky. Poseidon looked up, where, after many months of war, the clouds were finally parting. So, it's all over. Zeus lingered his gaze on the horizon. For the first time, he didn't have to hide, free prisoners, or prepare another attack against his father. Cronus was no longer on the throne. The Titans were imprisoned, and his brothers were given their own domains. An unusual silence fell over the new world. And for a few moments, it really seemed like there was no one left to fight. Then the earth shook. At first it sounded like a distant impact, left behind somewhere deep beneath the cliffs by the Titan war. But the rumble didn't subside. It grew louder. Rocks began to tumble down the slopes, and in the distance, a strange glow rose above the horizon, as if the earth itself were opening up and releasing something that shouldn't have been exposed to the open air. Poseidon was the first to stop looking at the sea and turned to the source of the noise. Tell me it's just a mountain collapsing. Hades already understood that no. Kush, the mountain, does not roar. Typhon rose from the depths. Even among the creatures Zeus had seen during the war, there was nothing quite like it. A colossal body towered above the earth, serpentine forms writhing around it, diverse voices emanating from its many monstrous heads, and wherever it passed, the familiar order of the world seemed to vanish beneath fire, wind, and stone. The Titans were an army. Typhon looked like a disaster. Zeus looked at him and, for the first time since his victory, realized how short-lived the peace had been. He had just won the sky, but now a being had appeared capable of turning this new power into another brief chapter between two wars. Poseidon raised his trident. "We're not planning to fight again for several months, are we?" Zeus did not answer immediately. Typhon approached, and another blow shook the earth so violently that part of the slope collapsed. "No," said Zeus. "We can't wait this time." If Cronus was fighting to maintain a power he feared losing, Typhon didn't need an old grudge or a family prophecy. His very appearance threatened the order that had only just begun to emerge after the fall of the Titans. If Zeus retreated now, the entire victory over his father would be for naught. Hades looked at his brother. Together? Zeus turned his gaze to the lightning. "First, I'll try to stop him." Poseidon wanted to object, but Typhon was already too close. The sky darkened. Zeus rose to meet him. The first lightning strike illuminated the horizon, but Typhon did not fall. He responded with fire and a monstrous roar that shook the rocks, then advanced as if the strike had only angered him. Zeus took a few steps back and threw lightning again. This time she hit closer. Typhon roared. "It worked!" Poseidon shouted. But almost immediately, the huge shadow rose again. Zeus realized that one flash would not stop this enemy. Typhon advanced, his every step causing the earth to tremble. Zeus moved higher, trying to keep his distance, then abruptly changed direction and struck again. Lightning passed through the dark clouds, struck the monster, and momentarily illuminated its entirety. Typhon staggered. Zeus did not allow him to recover. Another blow, then the next one. Now the thunder was almost constant, as each new flash arrived before the light of the previous one had faded. The ground around Typhon grew hot, the air trembled, and the creature that had just seemed unstoppable began to retreat. Poseidon looked up, and for the first time in a long time said nothing. Hades was also silent. They saw how the weapons obtained in the depths of Tartarus decide the final battle after the war for which they were created was over. Once upon a time, Zeus opened the doors to the captives because he could not defeat Cronus by previous means. Now the lightning of the Cyclopes saved the power that this victory brought him. Typhon tried to rise again. Zeus gathered his strength for the final blow. For a moment, everything around seemed to freeze. The wind, the stones, even the monsters' voices merged into one low hum. Then lightning struck. The light covered Typhon completely. The roar rolled across the ground, and when it died down, the monster no longer rose. For some time, no one moved. Poseidon was the first to lower his trident. "Is that all?" Hades looked at Zeus. "Don't ask. Last time, a new problem arose after that." Poseidon nodded slowly. "Fair." Zeus did not answer. He looked out at a world that, just moments before, had once again found itself on the brink of a new war. Now the earth was gradually calming. The fires were dying down, the clouds were parting, and a clear sky was returning above. Once upon a time, Cronus received a prophecy and decided that he could retain power if he destroyed his own children before they became strong enough. He swallowed 5. Instead of the 6th, he swallowed a stone. That child grew up in a secret cave, returned for his family, discovered Tartarus, found allies, received lightning, and overthrew the ruler who had spent his entire life trying to avoid exactly that outcome. But the fate of Zeus was not finally decided when Cronus fell. She made up her mind now. Because, in contrast to his father, Zeus was the son, returning what was taken from him. Against Typhon he already stood as someone who had something to defend. Poseidon went to the sea. Hades returned to his underworld. Zeus rose to where his domain was now located. Thunder rumbled across the world again, but this time, no one took it for the beginning of a new war. Once upon a time, this sound would have had to be drowned out by striking weapons on shields so that Cronus would not hear the cry of a hidden baby. Now there was no longer any need to hide Zeus. The king, who thought him dead, was overthrown. The Titans were beyond the gates of Tartarus. Typhon was defeated, and above the new order towered that very child who was once saved by a single stone. Lightning flashed in Zeus's hand.